1. If you look up Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, you'll find a lot of stories about hauntings and paranormal activity happening around the base. My whole family, aside from my dad who was rarely home, experienced very odd and paranormal things in our house. And we were told stories from our neighbors as well. I was a really young kid when we lived there, 6 to 8, but my memory is fairly clear about some of the things that happened to me. When we lived there, we would tell my mom all about the experiences we were having, and she would dismiss them. Finally, when we moved away, she told us her own experiences, and said she didn't want to scare us at the time. I thought I would finally write some of these down. They're going to be jumbled and disorganized. Sorry. Firstly, I had a neighbor girl I was friends with, who told me she would speak to other little girls through the air conditioning vents, and she would drop coins and little keychains down into the ducts for them. Along those same lines, my older sister once saw a black gooey mass ooze from one of the vents at a neighbor's house she was babysitting for. The girls she watched would also hold loud conversations in their bedrooms and would play with their friends in the walls during their bedtime. I was playing with dolls once in my shared bedroom with the door shut. I remember the doorknob kept twisting and opening every few minutes, and I just told it to stop, and it did. On another occasion, I noticed one of my stuffed animals missing, and my mom has thrown it away. Apparently, I had told my mom that the plush was whispering to me, and I wasn't sleeping because of it. I don't remember any of that, though. My older sister and I shared a bedroom with bunk beds, but we both slept in the bottom bunk together because there was just an odd presence in the top bunk that creeped us both out. We all expressed feeling extremely uncomfortable walking up or down the stairs like something was watching us. Even my mom admitted to sprinting up and down them, and occasionally checking behind her for eyes. My little sister had her own bedroom, and her toys would constantly go off at night, even if they were turned off. My mom once told us when we were older that my toddler sister and I were lying down for a nap, and she heard something in the room say, "I love you, Mommy." Confused, my mom said, "I love you too." But my sister said, "Who was that?" Or something along those lines. My older sister and I were playing at a friend's house at the time. We have a ton of stories, and lots from neighbors too. I was just wanting to share a few I thought were the strangest. Thanks for listening. If anyone else lived on this base and had experiences, please speak to me. I really want to explore this more. 2. The family that lived in my childhood home prior to us had a boy named Jack. Jack grew up to be a sergeant in the U.S. Army and fought in the Korean War where he was killed in action. My siblings and I were adopted from Korea and grew up in this house knowing that a boy who lived here before us had died fighting for our countries. Our main source of information was our elderly neighbor lady, so all we really knew was that his name was Jack, last name, and that his plane had supposedly been shot down over Busan. In '99, my little brother was adopted. His name is John, but we all call him Jack. My mom would often insist, like JFK. Though I often thought he was named after the Jack in the house, my parents both denied this to be the case. At some point in the early noughts, the surviving members of the previous family were in town and stopped by our house. They were curious about how it looked and wanted to reminisce about their childhood memories. They were introduced to us kids and my brother Jack. They commented that it was sort of neat that there was another Jack in the house, and my parents clarified that his name is technically John. We learned then that the previous Jack had also been a John. He and my brother also share a middle name, though with different spellings. Think along the lines of Stephen with a V and Stephen with a PH. Weird coincidence, right? Well, the coincidences don't stop there. My brother's bedroom had also been the late Jack's room. Contrary to what my family had always believed, we had thought that my room had been his. My Busan-born brother's room was decorated in an airplane theme at the time, adding a cherry on top of the whole bizarre coincidence sundae. At least if you recall what we were told by the neighbor lady regarding Jack's alleged death. Recently I did some digging, and I've come to discover that based upon Jack's division in the army, he wouldn't have likely been flying planes at all. In fact, his date of death and the time frame suggested by the division movements places him probably around the Busan perimeter, but not, perhaps, within Busan proper. Even without that perfect level of synchronicity, we're still left with the odd happenstance of my brother sharing the same first and middle names and bedroom with a man who grew up in this house before us. For more of a speculative paranormal addition, my brother grew up having night terrors, and by his teenage years, at which point my sister and I had moved out to go to college, had ceased to sleep in his bedroom entirely. He set up shop in the spare bedroom in the basement. Though he's very tight-lipped about anything that may or may not have occurred in the house, he is terrified of ghosts and the supernatural. He hates to stay at the house alone, and he and my dad both claim to have heard laughter and conversation coming from the room where the previous family used to listen to the radio, pre-TV, together. My dad finds this faint chatter comforting and kinda neat. My brother feels essentially the exact opposite. I have not really encountered anything, but I really just was prompted to write all this because I came home after a few days out, and my brother's bedroom light was on. My dad never comes upstairs, and when I asked him about it, he actually immediately suggested I had left it on, or someone had broken in. When I left the house last week, I had to use my phone's flashlight to navigate because I left so early in the morning that it was still dark out. This also isn't the first time I've come home to find his bedroom light on. I'm trying to tell myself it's maybe a wiring problem, but I'm not going to pretend I don't have an absolute heart attack when I see it on, when I know that no one has been in there in days, or even weeks. 3. I've been hearing and reading a lot lately about people having creepy experiences with shadow figures. I don't know why, has there been an influx or something? And every time I do, I think of the experience I had with one when I was 13. So 8 years ago now. So back then, I had just gotten a loft bed. The black wooden one from IKEA, to be specific. Every night when I'd go to sleep, I'd keep the TV on, which sat in my dresser across from the bed, because the noise would lull me to sleep. Well, that night the noise and the light was keeping me up, thanks, radiation, so I decided to turn it off. When I did, my bedroom was pitch black. My door was closed. I didn't have any night lights and no other devices were on. I rolled over onto my side, facing towards the wall, and closed my eyes. A few minutes went by, and I was still wide awake. I was beginning to get frustrated because I still couldn't fall asleep. Just as I was thinking about this, I got the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. You know how you can just tell when someone's walked into the room? Almost like the energy or density changes. Well, I had an older sister who had a habit of creeping into my room late at night to steal my stuff, so I thought, okay, it's just Hannah getting something. But when I opened my eyes, my room was still dark. This told me it wasn't her because whenever she'd come in, she'd leave the door open a crack and the hallway light would shine through. Plus, she's loud as hell, although she tried her best to be quiet so as not to wake me up. But my room was absolutely silent. As soon as this realization dawned on me, an overwhelming sense of dread came over me. I knew someone was in the room with me, just as I know my own name. But since the human mind needs tangible proof of everything, I decided to check just in case I was imagining it. If you know anything about loft beds, you know that those things are loud as hell when you move, since you're basically propped up on stilts in the air. So as I moved, I tried to do so as quietly as possible, so that whatever was in the room with me wasn't aware I was there, and knew it was there too. When I finally reached the slats and looked down through them, sure enough, there was this black figure in the shape of a person, standing in front of my dresser. I straight up knew that whatever this thing was, it was evil because A, malevolence practically oozed from it and spread over my bedroom, and B, this thing was literally blacker than the darkness of my bedroom. Like imagine being in a pitch-black room, and then a figure materializes. No tangible figures, just straight up, filled-in outline of the shape of a person. That is darker than the dark. That's what this thing was. I don't know how, but as soon as I laid my eyes on this thing, I saw it turn its head and look at me. Again, it didn't have any features, so I didn't physically see its eyes looking at me, but it's almost like I could see it and feel it with my mind. It paralyzed me. Then it began moving and walking towards my ladder like it was going to climb up. I shot straight up in terror, knowing that if this thing got to me, something bad was sure to happen, and reached out my arm to turn on my ceiling fan light. Luckily, it was literally less than a foot away from where I was. I yelled out the guardian angel prayer as fast as I could, my mouth stumbling over the words in my haste, and as soon as I finished, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace and love come over me, like I've never felt before, as if something was there protecting me. When that feeling came, all sense of darkness and negativity just shattered. I was so calm and at peace, almost like I'd taken a Xanax, although I didn't know what that feeling was until years later, that I just flicked the light back off and instantly fell asleep. I haven't seen a shadow person since, but I do feel people and things standing near my bed at night all the time. It'll wake me up, but I'll never see anything. Whenever I feel like I'm not alone, I'll imagine a white light surrounding me and emanating from my body, and tell whatever it is in my mind that is not welcome and must leave. Works every single time without fail. But the experience I had when I was 13 terrified me, and I hope it never happens again. 4. First off, I was raised Christian, but rather dramatically lost my faith in my early 20s. I've been an atheist pretty much ever since. I live in an old house, 1920s I think, that was renovated sometime in the 60s, and then renovated and converted into 3 apartments in the 80s. My upstairs neighbor, who has recently moved out for unrelated reasons, said that there was a ghost in her apartment. She claims to have experienced it several times, and at least once saw a male figure standing over her in bed. While they were gone, and later confirmed that the house was empty, even of the cat, I heard one of their office chairs roll on the tile floor, a sound I was familiar with by then. A few weeks ago, after they had started moving out, and it was empty even of the cat again, I heard 2 distinct footsteps. I didn't believe it was supernatural. There's a physical explanation for everything. Well, I can read tarot. It's a little hobby I picked up when I saw some cool decks and bought them. I decided that I would see if there was a ghost by using the tarot cards to communicate. I didn't expect to actually get anything meaningful, certainly not something concrete. But I did. I won't go into the specific cards, though I have most of the answers documented. I simply spoke loudly, asked the thing upstairs who or what it was, and why I wanted to know. He told me he was a man. He was glad to be talking to someone. He didn't feel comfortable talking about himself. He didn't seem to think it would amount to anything. I asked him why he was upstairs. He said there was a sudden change, and he couldn't leave. I assumed the remodeling of the house, if ghost lore is to be believed. He seemed to be okay with it, though. His existence upstairs was peaceful. I asked him why he was still here, why he was a ghost. I got a long spread. I kept feeling compelled to lay down cards. It seemed to imply that he was still young in death, that there was some higher power, and that while he could leave for paradise, or whatever, he was stuck here because of wants beyond his will to let go of. I was stunned. I took a picture of that spread. Today, I opened up questions to him. He asked about my fiancée and whether we plan to have children. He noted that I have a lot of good in my life, but I'm still suffering from depression. Then he gave me advice to keep focused on things, pursue life in balance, and not to get taken by impulse, which are all great pieces of advice for my situation. In all, I don't know how I feel. Obviously, I had to approach the situation as if it were real. I don't know anymore. The cards I drew were distinct, appropriate for answers to my questions. It was as though someone was actually communicating with me through them. Has anyone else had similar experiences, and or have advice for how to or whether I should continue? He feels kind of like a new friend, one that I'm not even sure is real, and has me doubting a lot about my beliefs. I even asked about his experience after death. It seemed to say that it was judgment and rebirth, along with lonely introspection. 5. The house on 16th Street was a house that my mom grew up in. The woman who raised her owned it, and she ended up renting it from her when I was 8. We lived there until just before my 10th birthday. Anyway, this is a story, so let's get to it. The first thing happened days after we moved in. We had a beautiful Persian cat that was given to us from a friend. The cat's name was Kiki. He was an extremely obedient cat. He didn't like being on the furniture, and absolutely hated being outside. We had him at the house for about 3 days before we never saw him again. We searched the house top to bottom. We looked in every single room, cabinet, under every piece of furniture. We looked outside in bushes, trees. We scanned the alley behind the house, and kept an eye on the road in front of the house for his body. He was just gone. There could be logical explanations for that, though. About a week after living in the house, I started hearing things while I lay in bed. My brother and I had rooms on the 2nd floor, while my mom and her boyfriend was on the 1st floor. Every night as I tried to fall asleep, I could hear someone walking up the stairs. Sometimes it sounded like running. Sometimes it sounded like 2 people coming up them. I also would hear the floorboards of the hallway creak as if someone were pacing across them. I always left my bedroom door open at night because I was afraid to close it. I could see the hallway from my bed. I would hear these footsteps but never see anyone come into the hallway from the stairs. There was just never anyone there. The school that I went to was across the street from the house. When I was in 2nd grade, I came home and noticed that I didn't see my mom's car in the driveway. Obviously, that meant she wasn't home. I walked into the house and called for her a few times anyway. Nothing. As I made my way through the house, I started to hear her voice. It sounded like she was having a phone conversation. It was coming from the basement. I called for her once more before making my way down to the basement. The moment I placed my foot on the top stair, the talking stopped. I was scared, but I still went down to see if she was there. She wasn't. There was no one in the house. I was the only one there. I ran up those stairs as fast as I could, straight out of the front door. I waited on the front lawn for my mom to get home. She showed up about 15 minutes later and asked why I was sitting on the lawn with my jacket and backpack still on. I gave her an excuse. I didn't tell her what had happened because I didn't think she'd believe me. I never felt alone in any part of that house, but the basement felt 10 times worse. It was a large basement with 2 large rooms. The first was paneled and carpeted. It had a very small closet-like room in it that was lined with shelves. The woman who raised my mom used to pickle beets and other vegetables and store them in that room. The second room was the laundry room. It was large, just cement and rock. In the finished room, we had a TV and futon, and my mom's boyfriend's weights and workout equipment, as well as his guitar collection all down there. The second summer that we were there, he had bought a new guitar at a yard sale. He was hella geeked about it, and brought it into the basement as soon as we got home. He set it on a stand in the center of the room and went upstairs to call a friend. About 15 minutes later, we smelled smoke and noticed it came from the basement. He ran down there and his new guitar was on fire. It was burning from the headstock and the top of the neck. He put the fire out and looked for a source. There wasn't one. The guitar was not plugged into any amp, and was not near any walls with outlets as it was in the center of the room. He assessed the damage, and the guitar was ruined. The fire burned so hot that it burned through every cord, and the headstock was nearly charred. The last thing that happened in that house was the absolute worst. It was the same summer as the guitar fire. My cousin came over to spend the night. She never slept over before, so we were super excited. It was when we went to bed that all hell broke loose. I had 2 single beds in my room in case I ever had someone over. This was the first and last time. I was already asleep in my bed when I woke up to the most blood-curdling scream that I have ever heard in my life. I sat up and looked at her, and she was crying and screaming. "Oh my God, did you see it? Did you see it? What was that? Oh my God!" I was sleeping, so I didn't see anything. All I could say was, "What?" My mom and her boyfriend came running up the stairs into my room and asked what was going on. My cousin was fucking hysterical. She was so scared that she couldn't move. My mom's boyfriend had to carry her downstairs. The whole time I could just hear her crying and saying, "What was that? Did you see it?" I was stunned and in complete terror. I just sat in my bed, too afraid to move. After about an hour, my mom came up and told me that my cousin was going home. I asked my mom what happened, and she told me that everything was okay and not to worry about it. About a week later, I asked my mom about it again, and what she told me chilled me to my bone. She told me that my cousin told her that she heard someone coming up the stairs, and when they reached the top, it was just a big black thing, like a cloud almost. And that when it got into the center of the hallway, it grew and filled the hallway and blocked out the light. I just looked at my mom. I was so scared that I didn't have any words. She asked me if I've ever seen anything like that in the house. I never saw that, but I did tell her about the footsteps. To this day, I have never spoke to my cousin about it. She has never brought it up, and I'm too afraid to ask her about it. We moved out that autumn. Years later, I brought it all up to my mom and told her everything that I experienced while living there. I was nervous, but I just wanted to tell someone. She surprised me by telling me that she experienced the same things, and some even worse when she lived there as a kid. She told me that she once rolled a ball into the room with the jarred pickle shit in it. She said that the ball stopped in the center of that room, and that all of the jars shattered where they sat on the shelves. She also told me that the neighbors would often call the police and tell them that my uncle, who was a child at the time, was on the roof and running around in his underwear. When the police got there was never anyone on the roof. Sometimes this would happen when no one was even home. She said that this was a constant thing. All I know is that whatever lives in that house never felt like a human spirit. It didn't feel animal. It didn't feel natural. It felt menacing. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 161. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. You know, when I record late at night, and it's about 20 minutes to 5, so when I record this late, it is amazing how quickly I can get through an audio recording. Nighttime is the preferable time to record, but it's not always ideal. Okay, let's see. Friday, we'll probably have a stream at some point this weekend. I'll just do the one, though I don't know what day. I'll see what I have to do. There's some bits and bobs I need to organize. But I will try and give you a few hours notice beforehand. I'll schedule the stream as I usually do. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.